In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul gives some teaching that relates to the rapture issue. In verse 1, he says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that you be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ," literally, as that the day of the Lord is at hand. "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, namely the day of the Lord, shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." In verse 1, where Paul says, "We beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him," it's obvious he's talking here about the rapture of the church. In John chapter 14, a rapture passage, Jesus talks about his coming and receiving the believers unto himself, so that they may be with him. And the implication is the believers will be transported from the earth to meet the Lord so that they can be with him. There is a gathering of the believers together with the Lord. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, the most extensive passage on the rapture of the church in the Bible, he talks about Jesus coming and the church saints being caught up from the earth to meet the Lord in the air. There again is the gathering of the church saints to be with the Lord. The language is basically the same. And so here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1, Paul's clearly talking about the rapture of the church to meet the Lord. A significant thing about this statement of Paul in verse 1 is this: the preposition translated "by" in the statement, "by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together unto him," has the force of, on behalf of, or in defense of. A number of Greek scholars point out that Paul is writing here to defend his teaching that he'd given to the Thessalonians earlier about the rapture of the church. Why was it necessary for him to defend this teaching? Well, verse 2 and 3 give us the reason why. Someone had come to the Thessalonians after Paul had already taught them about the doctrine of the rapture and had said to them, "I know that the Apostle Paul has either received a revelation from God through the Spirit, or I also know that he has given some official teaching, or I know that he's written a letter in which he has declared that you are already in the day of the Lord, with the wrath of God to be poured out." Now, Paul indicates here in verses 2 and 3 that teaching by false reporters was really shaking up or disturbing the Thessalonian Christians. The language he uses here, he says, verse 2, "You're not to be soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of the Lord is at hand." And the words translated here, shaken and troubled, carry the implication of being shaken loose from your mooring, from your anchor, and thereby departing from a view that you had been taught and that you had held in the past. The idea was that the fact that they were told that the day of the Lord had already come and they were in it was beginning to shake them loose from the teaching about the rapture that Paul had given them before. And by the way, the statement at the end of verse 2 that the day of the Lord is at hand, there's a perfect tense involved in the verb form here, and really what they were told is that the day of the Lord had already begun before Paul wrote this second epistle to them, and therefore they were already in it. It's not that the day of the Lord is about to come. The perfect tense indicates that what they've been told falsely, contrary to Paul's teaching, is that the day of the Lord had already started in the past before Paul wrote this letter, and that therefore they as church saints were already in it. But why would that teaching, that the day of the Lord had already begun and they were in it, shake them up so badly to the point that some of them were ready to depart from the teaching that Paul had given earlier about the rapture of the church? It seems to me you're forced to conclude the reason they were shaken up is because Paul earlier had taught them that the rapture of the church would take place before the day of the Lord would begin, and that therefore by rapture they would be removed from the earth before the day of the Lord would begin, and as a result of the rapture, that they as Christians would never be in the day of the Lord. But now this false report that Paul later on had changed his mind and had taught that the day of the Lord had already begun and they were in it, really shook them up, because that seemed to contradict what Paul had taught them earlier about the rapture of the church. And so this teaching of Paul here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 again infers very strongly that he had taught them that the rapture of the church will take place before the day of the Lord will begin and be a totally separate event, even from the beginning of that day of the Lord, and that therefore by rapture the church saints would never go into the day of the Lord. And then to demonstrate even more so that this report that they've been given was false, he says, verse 3, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day," referring to the day of the Lord, "shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." Paul's teaching that two things must take place before the day of the Lord had begun, and obviously his point is neither one of those had taken place yet, and since they had not taken place, therefore the day of the Lord had not begun, and they were not in it.